portraiture, lithographs by British artists, the work of the 19th century Hungarian painter August Scheft, the travels of Charlotte Lady Canning from Kolkata to the Khyber Pass, cartography on Henry Kissinger's secret visit to China in 1971. It's a book from a head through a head to a head. But I did not know that Aijaz, as we familiarly call him, is also a student of deltiology. Now, and he has given thanks to a fellow, I think one would say, deltiologist, for his assistance in producing this simply fabulous book. For those of you who would like to know and don't know what deltiology means, it is the study and collection of postcards. And it comes from the Greek deltion, which is a miniature from the word delton, which is a writing tablet. And I think we've all now learned something to start with. Can you hear me? I think this is good. Okay. Can you hear me at the back? So I think it's most unusual that deltiology is indeed the collection of postcards. And I don't know how many of us of the slightly older generation are part of that generation where whenever we went on holiday, we used to buy maybe 5 or 6 or 10 postcards to send to aged aunts, cousins, friends of where you'd gone on holiday. I certainly did, and unwittingly was myself a deltiologist because I was collecting postcards, because it's very difficult to then throw them away because they are reminiscences, they're pictures of where you've been or where your friends have been. And to my amazement, I found an album that belonged to my mother, who traveled from Australia in the 1920s. And she also was a deltiologist, although I never would have known, because in this album was the story through postcards of her arrival in England. And the first postcard was the ship upon which she traveled. And I was rather wondering what to do with this, but I now see it as a collection of a diary. It's a pictorial diary of the places she visited at a certain period in time. And so what we have here is now the forgotten images, postcards, pre-Pakistan, 1890 to 1947. And I think just because you haven't all got the book in front of you and you haven't had the opportunity to purchase it yet, we're going to have a very quick slide presentation just so that we can see some of the magnificent images which are in the book.
Thank you very much indeed, Victoria. It's a great honor for me and a great pleasure because we go back, as you said, a long way. And probably not back to 1890 exactly, but nevertheless, to some time ago. I've been a great admirer of Victoria's writing, and therefore it's a special pleasure. Do you want to shift your chair a little?
Well,
yeah, it might be easier.
We'll just shift here so that everyone can see.
Will you be able to see? Omar? Omar? I know, but we can't see you. Come here. Come and sit. Oops. Omar, यहाँ आ जाओ. He'll come. Anyway, I'm delighted that there are so many of you, and so many of you here on a subject which is quite obtuse, and that is on, as Victoria said, on deltiology. Now, I won't go into the history of it, but it is important for you to understand that this was the cheapest form of communication in its day. And one of the reasons why was that it didn't require an envelope, it didn't require any... sorry. Okay. Thank you. You can tell that Michelle is a media person. I'm not. So when I grow up, I want to be like Michelle. So Postcards were cheap, but they were open, unlike letters, which had a little element of secrecy. So over the years, they became, because of their cheapness, they became very popular. And the number of postcards that were in circulation, let's say, around about 1980, 1890, put it in the billions, not the millions, in the billions. So, and they were printed in Germany, primarily, or the United Kingdom. Following the First World War, obviously, Germany was not acceptable as far as India was concerned. So local producers, local printers began a healthy market in the production of postcards. So let me just explain. I've been assured that if I click, it'll happen. Ready?
That's it.
No. Yeah, but I'm back. Come along, my friend. We've been through this. I've had 3 dress rehearsals with him. Okay. Voila. 1890 to 1947. This is the map. And please, no political undertones, etc. I'm not concerned with this, Azad Jammu and Kashmir. But this is what the geography of our area, that is now Pakistan, look like. And in this, my reason for taking 1890 is because that was when postcards became popular and in the subcontinent. So, and it continues to 1947, because post 1947, then you have a different market, and most of the people who were prone to sending postcards had already left the country. All of you are familiar with postmen. They would come and deliver at your house, and this gives you an idea of the kind of postman in India on the left-hand side in Udaipur. But as you'll probably see, rather like polio workers, they had to have an armed guard with them. And on the right-hand side, the more traditional form of postman. The earliest stamp that we have in postal stamp that we have in Sindh was as early as 1852. And this was called the Sindh dog. And it was really an impression done on wax. And this was then, so it's one of the rarest maps, rarest stamps, in fact, in the subcontinent. And then the earliest postcard, and because you're in Karachi, the earliest post office in Karachi was this one. Now, most of you are also familiar with the site that would appear for illiterate people who would then go to the local scribe and ask him to write. And inevitably, women also in Parda would go appeal to employ a local scribe. Now, it wasn't just for the poor. Postcards were also a familiar form of expression or communication between royalty. And I found this postcard, which was done by the Empress Alexandra, who was the wife of Nicholas II, the last Tsar. And she writes to her cousin, darling Georgie, Georgie being George V, and then says, I'm sorry, you know, I would like to thank you, etc. And I'm sorry that we can't meet more often. And it's interesting because this was in 1905, and within another 9 years, then Russia was at war with the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom with Germany, and they were all headed by first cousins. So Wilhelm II, etc., and the Tsar Nicholas were amongst themselves first cousins. Let's move now to Karachi, your city, and I'll give you some images very quickly of the kind of topography that existed here. Approaching Karachi, steamship coming in, and many of you would see this as the Bandar, Kothari Parade, as it is called. Prayer Hall, without the Sindh Club, without any of the other. Can you see? Are you able to see? Yep, okay. No. Sindh Club, this is before any of the surrounding buildings. And Prayer Hall, this is with the statue of Queen Victoria on the left-hand side, which was then removed. And I think it's now in Mohata Palace, probably. Yeah. Holy Trinity Cathedral. Anybody guess why it's unique, this particular picture? It's because the top story was removed. when it was constructed, they said it looked like a giraffe. And so it was decapitated, and it then had 3 stories, and the 4th was just dismantled. Empress Market, as it used to be, then was devastated and is now, I understand, cleared and restored to what was its original glory. Bandar Road, I'm not sure how many of you remember that Bandar Road was once populated with trams and with ghoda garis, Victorias, and that is why city of Karachi was washed every evening of the excrement of the horses. KMC, anybody from the KMC here? Construction of the KMC building. Now, this is all, I want to emphasize, these are all topical pictures, you see. The point was that a person who was here, and he probably was an employee of the KMC, writes back to his family and he sends them a picture of it under construction. The white in our flag represents the Hindus. And so we have the Hindu Gymkhana, which is today NAPA, National Academy of Performing Arts. And if we continue on the theme of the Hindus, the Hindu temple at Manora, and the kind of devotee that you would expect to see there. Now, all of these were, as I've mentioned in the book itself, the point was that they all had to have a certain visual interest. So scenery, the more spectacular, the better. Monuments, the grander, the better. Events, the more contemporary, the better. People, the more picturesque, the better. And going out of Karachi, Mango Pir, and it's supposed to be the lice from the Pir Mango, which were then miraculously converted into alligators or crocodiles in this case. This is an unusual one, and it's a postcard, and that is of the dirigible called R101. And this was rather like the Titanic. It was novel, it was very large, first of its kind, and it was filled with gas. I'm not saying the Titanic was, but it was filled with gas. And the idea was that a person could then travel from Paris to Karachi with one stop in between for refueling. And inside this huge, monstrous whale of a ship you had rooms, and you had drawing rooms, and you had bedrooms, and you had... So they took the risk of cooking on board, but unfortunately, what they couldn't prevent was a spark at the time of reloading. And so Karachi built this huge hangar near... and this is what the dirigible looked like. When on its inauguration flight from Paris, it exploded. And so there was no point in having a hangar of this size in Karachi. Now, 1947, and Michelle has written movingly about her family's transition, as for many of us and many of you moved from India to what is now Pakistan. And this shows you the race course. But because it was the only area open in 1947, it was then the location for the lodgement of refugees. This is something we forget, and I, as a child, remember 2 things. One, the cortege of Qaid-e-Azam in September 1948, going down Victoria Road. I was about 6. And the second, which is a very moving memory, is of walking on Victoria Road and stepping over the bodies of sleeping muhajirs, persons who had nowhere to stay, not even the race course, and were sleeping on the pavements of Karachi. We tend to forget this, and as to what it was like then and how far we have come now. But I'll now move from Karachi, and the structure of the book is that you have Karachi as a capital, and then the rest of Sindh, then you have Lahore, Punjab, KPK, Peshawar, and then the rest of KPK, and then Balochistan. So let me quickly go to, this is the Fuleli Canal outside Hyderabad, and the tombs of the Emirs of Sindh. The Miani Monument to celebrate, at the time, from the British point of view, the the Battle of Miani in 1843, by which Sir Charles Napier then made that famous remark, "Peccavi, I have sinned." Victoria Tower, not many people will know of this one, but it is in Jacobabad, and to commemorate the Jubilee of Queen Victoria. And Mohenjo-daro. And this was a contrived photograph, but done for popular dissemination, which showed the width. So these people who were put there was to demonstrate the width of Mohenjo-daro streets. And if we continue northwards, we come to Sakhar, and there is this minaret of Masoom Shah. It was a sentinel. And Satbela, an island between Sakhar and Rori, in which there are a combination of both temples, Hindu temples, as well as a Muslim mosque. The natives of Sindh, this is what they look like. This is what your ancestors look like. And they're wearing a thing called the Saraiki Topi, very distinctive to the residents of Karachi and of Sindh. Now I'm taking you further north, and we go to Khairpur, which at that time was a riyasat. It was this principality. And this is the palace of the Amirs, of the Mir of Khairpur. And I'll take you to the next one, which is Bahawalpur. Bahawalpur, and forgive me, Victoria, toadies of the British, they celebrated their association with this 100 years from 1834 to 1934. And I remember asking one of the Abbasi family who were from Bahawalpur, I said, you know, have you seen this postcard? And there's a kind of 100 years of fidelity. And he said, how do you think we survived? So, Multan, a nice picture of the tomb of Rukn-e-Alam, but with the twist of having an English British army something. But what if you look, they are being drawn not by horses or even by mules, but they're being drawn by bullocks. Now, all of these are, as I'm trying to demonstrate very quickly, are symptomatic of the kind of views that were extant at the time, but also those which were of interest to people in the United Kingdom, Germany, France, wherever the people came from, but back in the families, of interest to the families. Lahore, have a nice time. And this was an early postcard of Lahore. My alma mater. Anybody from Aijazuddin here? Yes? No? Okay, sorry for you, Yad. Anyway, for those who didn't go to Aijazuddin, but this was built in 1886. I was the principal there for 3.5 years. I was a student, principal, and then later my son, or rather, in between, my son also went to Aijazuddin. Done in 1886 for the princes of the Punjab, and now is, I hope, thank God, it's far more democratic in its admission. The tomb of Anarkali, shown at the time when it was the first cathedral of Lahore. So you will see at the top a cross on the dome. That cross was removed, but inside the tomb of Anarkali, the cenotaph has been shifted from the center, which is where it should be, to the side. And it was used as an altarpiece by the British. Subsequently, the new cathedral was built, and this was then converted into the Punjab Records Office. But as a kind of humiliation, Anarkali's tomb was called St. James's Church, named after a male saint. The late film director, Sham Benegal, he made a very interesting observation. He said Anarkali was not one of the Khanizas, one of the dancing girls who had made a pass at Jahangir, because that was to be expected. And I mean, that was what she was there for. He said the reason for this kind of punishment was because she was one of the younger wives of Akbar. And what he could not countenance was the fact that his son was having it off with one of his younger wives. And that is why this particular form of punishment was, sorry? Anyway, you're also remonstrating? All right. Well, the Badshahi Mosque, an early postcard. Now, it was intentionally done as watercolors. And then subsequent printers would use the same image, but add their own Eid greetings on top. Wazir Khan's Mosque, one of the glories of Lahore. It's called a University of Design by Lockwood Kipling. And if you wanted to tour Lahore, then you had a choice of two. One was the Hackney carriage, and third class and second class. And the second class was 6 annas per hour. And the church that you see in the back is behind what is now the State Bank. And I came across this very interesting postcard which showed the arrival of missionary nuns in Lahore. And they come on a bullock cart. And it was a particular Franciscan order which sent these nuns out here. Then, as I mentioned to you, the cathedral was shifted from Anarkali's tomb to the present cathedral, designed by Sir Gilbert Scott, and the Lahore High Court. And in the lawns adjacent to it was the statue of Lord Lawrence, Sir John Lawrence, and this famous inscription of, "Will you be ruled by the pen or by the sword?" What he didn't foresee was that in modern Pakistan, we would be ruled both by the pen and by the... This is a view from the Sheesh Mahal of Maharaja Ranjit Singh Samadhi on the right-hand side, constructed by my ancestor in 1839-49, and Badshahi Mosque on the left. And then the entrance to the fort, Alamgiri Gate. And within the Samadhi, we had a cupola designed by Bhairam Singh Mistry of Queen Victoria to commemorate her jubilee, but it was completed in 1904. It remained there for a number of years as a centerpiece, focal point in Lahore, epicenter of Lahore, until in the 1950s, there was a movement against this. And so the statue was removed. So Sikh Transit Gloria, Sikh Transit Victoria. So she was put onto this cart and taken to the Lahore Museum, where you can see her today. Ignominious. Now I'm taking you northwards towards Pindi, and here are some images, the Nachghar, dancing hall, and this is now a club which is run by the army, but it was at one stage the Rawalpindi Club. And a statue of Queen Victoria facing the church. And this particular statue has an interesting history because that is what it looked like in 1947, pre-1947, in this time, 1910. And this is what it looks like now in the forecourt of the British High Commission. The reason is the arms were removed, and when I saw it, Nicholas Barrington happened to be High Commissioner, and looked at it, and I said, you know, it reminds me of somebody. And he said, who? I said, well, Benazir Bhutto, because Benazir in her first government, you'll recall, used to wear a chadar, so she did not have to shake hands with anybody. And she looked like the armless queen. And so I did this, and then when Her Majesty came in 1997, I presented her with a copy of the book, and it happened to have this title. And so she looked at it and said, and Prince Philip said, you saw it at the High Commission yet? She said, of course I saw it, I remember. But High Commissioner never put arms on that statue because you'll destroy the title of his book, won't you? So, Murray, let's move northwards even further. Murray and an early view of Murray. The Mall was at the lower, what's called the lower Topa at the moment. And when there was a fire in the 1920s, then all the shops were removed and taken higher, and you can see they're now adjacent to the church. And this is the church which dominates the topography of Murray. I'll now quickly take you to Peshawar and the rest of KPK. So let's turn to Peshawar, the Pathans. And this is a card which showed the various types of Pathans, because they were intriguing, as you know, the ones in the northwest, the barrier between in the Great Game, and the Kisa Khani Bazaar, and the fur market, which used to be a focal point as far as furs were concerned, and the export of them. Islamia College, which Quaid-e-Azam visited in 1948, yes, I think. And this, which looks like a mosque, but was actually designed as a mosque for the Roman Catholics. But because the Roman Catholics at that time came from a lower class, if you like, so they were converts, and so they had to be given a monument, a building to pray in, which looked like a mosque, right? But it was a facsimile, if you like. But inside was the church. So this was one way of fooling the masses. Jamrud Fort, famous, built by Akbar, etc., and a bulwark against invaders from the north. Khyber Pass, convoy of camels coming through. And this particular one, which I think is lovely, that it's absolutely forbidden to cross the border, right? It's still true today. And here, Peshawari Pathan lovelies, okay? But you can't have women like this and not have somebody peering in, looking at them. Quetta and Balochistan, the rest of Balochistan. These are significant because there was this famous earthquake in 1933-35, and many of the buildings were destroyed. So the images that you'll see here now are valuable because they show the buildings as they were. And this one, for example, is of the High Court, the court and the Treasury buildings, gone. Another one of Sandeman Hall, gone, to commemorate Robert Sandeman. And this was what the railway station was like immediately after the earthquake. This was not a natural disaster. This building was subject to a man-made disaster. When my wife Shahnaz and I went to see this building, this one, trying to trace it, we discovered that it had been knocked down because the army had felt that this was now obsolete. And so they built a huge, spanking new, ugly building in its place. And what was cruel was that this particular, Staff College was on the side, which was the safest side of Quetta, because there was a fissure between the old town and the new one. And instead, what nature couldn't do, GHQ did. The fruit sellers, again, topographically interesting, individually, and Brohis, particularly interesting, because they were almost medieval in their in their clothes, in their locks. And here we have the Kojak Tunnel, which is one of the longest tunnels at the time, 2.5 miles. I'll now come closer to Chitral. And we have one picture, I've reduced it to one, which is of Christmas greetings being sent from Chitral. So obviously somebody from here is sending it to the United Kingdom. And you can see the fort of Chitral with young husband who was responsible for the relief of Chitral in 1894. Now I'm going to introduce, let's have a bit of fun. I'll introduce some social pictures, okay? They were not all of topography, they were not all of historical events and monuments, etc. So let's start with one, which is on Nestlé's, an early picture of Nestlé's, where they're advertising their milk products. And here's another, which shows Caraballo's tonic. And they were very advanced in those days. There were tonics for men and women. And so that is why you see both of them astride this donkey. And here is another one of advertising Sarwalo's tonic. But you can see the absurdity of the man's dress and headdress particularly. And it was printed in Trieste. Sorry? I'll ask the printer. It's just a mistake. And this one is called Roses of the Punjab, I Don't Think. Now, two images of two dancing girls. One of them from Karachi, and they were called Miss Badua Jan of Karachi, And it was a name which was applicable to many dancing girls throughout the northern India. But this one was then adopted by this particular person. And I thought it was rather nice that these two ladies, who were obviously very popular and famous, should have been included and immortalized in these postcards. And here we have an image of what is called a beggar, a Pathan beggar from the northwest. But to show that this kind of vanity was not restricted to beggars, I thought, rather than showing you another picture, I copped out with this one. I could have put another picture which showed people with a lot of medals, but I want there to be freedom after the speech. And this lovely picture of a Pankhavala, and he's lying on the ground reading, and his foot is attached to the string, which in the next room is attached to the pankha. And so he keeps pulling it on that string and then provides some kind of ventilation. Let me conclude with, I mentioned to you earlier that I was witness to Quaid-e-Azam's funeral, and this was a postcard which commemorated, it's slightly beyond 47, obviously, 1 year beyond, but this one I've included quite deliberately because it was topical. And it showed you here all of the personalities, primarily male, who were associated with the Quaid. And on the right-hand side, in the corner, you can see Fatma Jinnah, Miss Fatma Jinnah. But I'm including this because even Quaid-e-Azam would not have appreciated being taken to his last resting place on a tank. He actually went, it was on a cortege which was pulled by naval officers, but I can't help feeling this is a kind of foretaste in 1948, a premonition of things to come. So let me end here, and Victoria, back to you. So this is a brief introduction of the kind of things, images.
Thank you so much, Aijaz, for that absolute tour de force. And I think it shows we must get the complete book so we can see all the postcards. You've answered some of my questions, but I've still got lots more to come. The first thing that, just before we plunge into the actual book, what's interesting to me is what warranted, and did you manage to find out what warranted a postcard? Now, you mentioned this one is a commemorative postcard, so that's kind of logical. I thought it was very interesting having the postcard of the refugees, and some of them are, I just wondered, is there any indication when you're studying postcard collection as to what would make the cut, that you'd think, okay, it's worth printing 10, 20, 30, 100 postcards of a particular topic? The scenic ones may be more obvious, but why some of these sort of quirky pictures? I mean, indeed, there's one of Baluchistan of a beggar. How many beggar postcards do you think might have been, not a beggar, sorry, the dwarf.
Yeah.
How many dwarf postcards might have been sent?
Well, they were novel. That was the first thing. They were novel. And so being sent from, let's say, Quetta, or a picture of a dwarf, it was just intriguing. And the second thing is that, as you mentioned, of all the popularity of these postcards came into the fore because the images, in a way, replaced the necessity of a long message. And so initially, you had the blank on the back, the address on the front, and you could continue the message in the front. But after a while, they realized that if you sent a picture, then all you needed to do was to describe, have a brief message that was being put along with the address, and on the back would be this picture. The imperative was, and I suppose the novelty was, to send pictures which would intrigue the addressee. So yes, they could have sent pictures of Pathans or Balochis, as the case may be, but to send one of a dwarf, or to send one like that one of the the beggar with all the medals, I thought was rather fun. And if a person received it, they'd have a laugh looking at it.
Yes, but obviously, I mean, postcards started, as you said, by becoming a cheaper form of sending a message. but obviously then to have the picture, that must have upped the price. So do you think it became more of a fashion, a sort of a fashionable to send a postcard?
It was a memento. It was a memento, and I think we've discussed this, where your mother sent a postcard of the ship that she was traveling on. So the person receiving it would have an instant connection with that. And the same as today, all you have to do is to pick up a phone, and messages will be communicated within seconds. All right? So
yes, you've mentioned in the introduction that the postcards have now been replaced by WhatsApps.
WhatsApp, absolutely.
Which is
absolutely. And our pictures, I mean, it's live, it's on real time. So we take pictures and immediately they're being transported across the world. Postcards took a little longer, but nevertheless, they had the same purpose, which was to create a communication bond between the addressee and the sender and the addressee.
Now, you started collecting postcards in the 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
That's, say, 30 years ago. What gave you the inspiration that, I mean, you might think, well, you've got a collection of postcards, but what made you think to turn it into this magnificent book?
Well, there's a commercial reason for this. I began by collecting miniature paintings, Indian miniature paintings, and as a result of my research, but researches of other scholars in the field, they became pricey. And so I couldn't really afford miniature paintings as such, and I come back to Pakistan. So I began collecting lithographs, which were cheap at the time, British lithographs, and old photographs, etc., because they were, as I've said, comparatively cheaper than miniatures. And they were still, the prices were going up. When they became too expensive, then I said, now what? And so postcards. They were quite cheap, and I'm embarrassed to say how much I paid for each one of these. Most of them are from my collection, mine and my wife's. So it really was an economic issue for me. And it was just whenever we were going abroad, you would go to a little flea market or something, or go to one of these dealers, and they'd have a batch of postcards. Sometimes, and I have to pay tribute here to a gentleman called Bob Scholes, who's I've mentioned in the book. He was a librarian in Ealing, and he lived with his mother. Every year he'd come to Lahore, and he would dress in a salwar kameez with chappals, and he'd carry a bag, and he lived in Lahore Hotel, room number 3. I still remember it. And he would just wander around and take pictures and collect ephemera, etc., and he'd take it back with him. I was at the society, the Pakistan Society, where your mother had arranged an exhibition, talk, and I was expecting him to be there, but he wasn't. And so then I went across to his house, the first time I'd been, and it was in the middle of somewhere at the end of a long row of suburban houses. I went to see him, and by this time he had dementia. And he said, I'm sorry I can't offer you tea because I can't be trusted to put the gas on. And then he showed me his books and postcards. He and I had been collecting over the years and exchanging postcards. So he said, take them. And I said, no, I can't just walk up. He said, no, because I know what's going to happen. I'll fall ill, and my nephews will just throw them away or sell them, which is exactly what happened. They sold them by the pound, all his books, etc. And so his postcards, I bought a bulk of them, but they were, it just happened to be on Pakistan. He was also a collector on Indian postcards. But it's mainly from bookshops.
The Russian Empress, that was from auction, was
That's
it?
from the Royal Collection.
Oh, that's from the Royal Collection?
Because it was sent to George V, later George V. And so it was part of the Royal Collection. And Queen Mary had kept it because it was so intriguing that her cousin, or her husband's cousin, is writing from Russia, saying, I'm sorry we can't meet, but but here's a postcard, and and that's it. I mean, the Empress of Russia, who is sending a postcard to her cousin in London, in Windsor.
Yes, but then the inspiration that you thought this would make a book, that came later?
Yes, and primarily because this audience is really what you are the ones, if you like, I'm the sender and you are the addressees. So my purpose was that they should be shared, not just retained by me and my family, but they should be shared with a much wider audience, and which is really why the genesis of this book.
So that's, yes, no, well,
Yeah.
it certainly gives us an idea what to do with all those postcards that are sitting in a bottom drawer that we've accumulated. Because not only did one send postcards, but it was a habit to buy postcards of
Wherever
a
you
place,
were.
wherever you were, or you buy 4 of the same, send 3, and then keep 1, because it was an early photographic recollection rather than take the photograph. Now, in your collection, what real surprises were there? I mean, we've got a lot of scenic ones and some of the humorous ones. Did you find, as you were compiling it, some photographs which you thought, well, that's very surprising why that was made into a photograph?
Yes, in a way, but one has to accept that many of these, the subjects that were chosen, were for their novelty value, right? And so what did surprise me was in certain cases, what was precious to me was the fact that the monuments were no longer there, the buildings were no longer there. And that is what gave them, in my mind, a rarity value as such.
Yes, so I mean, I think what we would learn, especially now looking through the book, because you've done a lot of the work for us, you've put it according to region and according to city, is the dramatic differences. You've got one here which shows what was in place of the Zenab market. And before people were taking photographs, if they were having postcards made and then sending them, it was an early way of showing what the areas looked like.
Absolutely. Like, for example, the early pictures of Frere Hall, those would have been sent because somebody's in Karachi and they were probably living in Napier Barracks, etc. There's an early one of Napier Barracks, which I wanted to share with you, but posted in Napier Barracks, and therefore he sent one of the nearest building, which was Frere Hall. So that kind of, and the messages, which are revealing in their own way, are precious. But one can't always include, and they tend to be succinct, which is the purpose of the postcard, succinct, brief, and as one of them put it, that I'm sending you this postcard because I don't want to write anything. And so the picture he was hoping would then substitute for the message.
Now, you've got very clear dates, Ijaz. The start date of 1890, is there particular significance for that?
Yes, because the earliest postcards that which appeared in Germany first, and then the United Kingdom, and then in India. So the earliest ones we have are reproducing photographs would have been done in the 1890s. And so the earliest one that I have in this particular book, in fact, dates from 1890. So we can't go beyond that because they were not extant at the time.
They're not extant. And you particularly decided it's pre-Pakistan,
Absolutely.
but it's the Pakistan region, but you
Absolutely.
end, with the exception of 1948,
Yep.
you end primarily with 1947. Because people weren't traveling so much, or you've got a different clientele sending, you haven't got the British have gone.
Absolutely. The clientele had gone. The British, who were prone to sending postcards back home, Christmas, New Year, whenever, they were no longer here. And so some of the final postcards that we have were sort of August the 13th, 1947, where a person is saying, well, I'm on my way back. So it was really, that was why I had to take a terminal date, because the clientele, as I've said, had changed. It was no longer
Would
here.
it be true to say that postcard sending is a kind of Western phenomenon?
Oh yeah, it was invented there. It was invented there. And also the postal rates were such that it was more economical for them to do it. From here, obviously it would appear as airmails. And so they would be charged the air rate for it.
And in terms of the dates, some of the postcards were dated so it was easy. Did you have to do some research to have a postcard that didn't have a date on, but by its content, you were able to determine, for example, that it was pre-World War I or post-World War I?
Yeah, combination of two things, Victoria. One was that the monument itself would indicate, okay?
Like the Trinity Tower.
Like the tower, okay, number one, Victoria Tower, Queen
Yes.
Victoria statue, whatever. We would be able to, more or less, we would say
Lacking
it
the
cannot
arms.
be before this date, and so therefore it may be posted.
Yes.
And the second was the printers.
Ah, yes.
The history of the printers themselves So we knew that XYZ, and you've seen here Jalbhai and people like this, their postcards would have been printed after they went into commercial business. And so we have a kind of commencement date because we know that that is when the business was established and this is when they were popularized.
Yes.
Raphael Tuck, for example.
Yes, indeed. I think what we, maybe this is a lesson for us to take home, is that we shouldn't throw out as much as we perhaps do, because postcards are still on sale. People maybe still buy postcards, they still write them, but they're not looking with an eye to history. No. As I think the people who kept the postcards before. So are we really looking at a bygone era in terms of postcard, in terms of deltiology?
Well, I've tried to find later postcards, and I've discovered that many of them were, for example, pictures of PIA aircraft or the stewardesses on PIA, things like that. They're not, I mean, I love stewardesses on PIA, but they're not exciting as a collector's item. So you probably see roses and Eid greetings and things like that. There are some in the book, for example, of Eid greetings where they are using flowers and
yes.
bouquets, etc. But they don't have the same, for me, the same excitement that the old pictures did.
Yes.
But it's a personal thing.
Yes.
Personal thing.
Do you think you have any gaps? I mean, it's pretty representative. I've been through it, but were there places where you think, well, I just wish I'd come across a postcard of the Bolan Pass, for example, or
Yes. Well, let me try and answer that. There are 3 or 4 collectors, and I mentioned their names in the books. One is a person in Omar Khan, to whom the book is dedicated, who started me off onto this, and we began exchanging information about it. So he has a collection of about 35,000 postcards of the whole of the subcontinent. His father, by the way, was Munir Ahmad Khan Sahab, the head of the Atomic Energy Commission at one stage. So Omar had an Austrian mother, Pakistani father, migrated, now lives in San Francisco. So he had a superb collection, has a superb collection. It's harappa.com if you want to go and see those. They've been uploaded. Ken Robbins in Washington, D.C., psychiatrist. He has about 15,000 postcards, which he's now donated to the University of Pennsylvania. And there's Ratnesh and Sangeeta Mathur, who were formerly in the Citibank and who are now collectors living in New Delhi, and they have something like 50,000 postcards, primarily of India, but always. So I had the advantage of being able to ask them that these are the ones that I'm going to be putting in the book. Can you suggest any others? And that's where this infantry one of Khairpur, Bhaulpur came in. And he said, yes, I've got this one, and why don't you use this? Or the ones of, the social ones of the dancing girls. I had one, somebody else had another, and so we brought them together, that kind of thing. So it's if there are any gaps, then what I would suggest to the audience is go into your attics, go into your father's, whatever you inherited, and see whether there is anything like this, and you'll find them. You'll find them. I mean, yes. You mentioned your own.
Well, no, I think it's a definitely less. I'm going to look again, less askance at my old postcards, because I think, to me, the message, and I'm sure for everybody who looks through this book, is the fascination of the architecture, the terrain, the topography, what we learn, which you can't necessarily capture. Maybe there are some old photographs, but having them in postcards, it gives you, and now with, of course, the reproductive skills that we've all got, you can see them as well as the original. But it certainly has given, I think for Pakistan, and for Pakistanis, it gives you a wonderful breadth and depth of what the country was like pre-1947, pre-partition. Now,
very quickly, a word of advice to all of you. Somebody came to me yesterday. Thank you. Somebody came to me yesterday. They think we're about 10 years old. They keep bringing a thing saying 10, 15 minutes, 10 minutes. I mean, for God's sake, I know that, we have been talking of, making presentations for the last 40 years. But thank you, nevertheless, whoever you were now. Thank you, dear. I wanted to mention, I was standing at the Liberty bookstall, and a man came up to me and said, sir, I was so moved by your book. And I said, why? He said, because I rushed home and I discovered that my albums, my father's albums had been eaten away by termites. And so they're gone. And so the reason I'm appealing to all of you, and I'm happy that there are so many of you, is please go back and see. And if you do come across any, just get them, because this is a precious treasure trove of our past. And
in
part of our
addition to
history.
which, the messages which are written, it's the
Absolutely.
postcards, but also the messages which are
Absolutely.
written. It's frozen in time. As a historian, I would say it's always of interest. What were people writing at that time? And you don't have to go through a lengthy letter. You've just got a short postcard.
Absolutely.
So being concise. Now, I'm sure we've got some questions. We've got about 10 minutes left, I think. Yes, 2 questions here. Do we have a mic? Roving mic.
Well, Sabine, why don't you start? Ladies first.
Yes, Samin.
Sabine is a dear friend of mine, and she's married to another dear friend. And
Thank you, Ijaz. I really enjoyed your session. I'm glad I made it. A provocative question.
of course,
This is from our time, but now we're living with the Z generation,
And the Generation A, we've learned as well.
Alpha generation, right?
Yeah.
What would be your advice for them? Because 50 years from now, AI might take over and maybe change all the images. So what is your advice to the Alpha and Z generation? What should they be preserving for like 50 years from now? Because everything might be changed by then by AI.
What they need is a reliable USB and hard disk, an external
power
hard
bank.
drive. Because I have that problem. What do you do with all these images and the communications that you've got? And the only answer is that you store them as safely as possible. But even there, you drop a hard disk and that's it, gone. So we are mortals after all, and as are machines. So,
Well, as we know from research, you're only as good as your research, and there are gaps. I mean,
Of course.
there are bound to be gaps. This gentleman.
Yeah, Ijaz Sahab, you have shown so many postcards. In one of the postcards, a huge hangar. At
Yeah.
that time, local people call it the Kala Chhapra. Kala Chhapra. And it was a very good facility, gas filling facility for the balloon. And until 1970s, Kala Chhapra was there. But it was very hurriedly dismantled. It was a national heritage. And like that, many national heritage in Karachi, now they are destroying. And Kala Chhapra should not have been destroyed. Because it was a very good facility, gas filling facility. Now people of Karachi need gas filling facility for the gas, is scarcity of the gas.
let me answer your question very briefly. I agree with you. Titanic should not have sunk. It's hypothetical now. Yeah.
Well, except that, Titanic is very sorry. This gentleman here. Have you got the mic? 8 minutes, the mic. Thank you.
Several postcard brief for 47, and I just was amazed how the art of writing the postcard and using every
Inch.
blank inch of it, and that was really amazing. So I don't know what I have to do with those cards, but they are pre-48.
Give them to us. Yeah, I mean, why are you asking? Please.
I'm asking that. I mean, today that's why I came here, just to know what we have to do with those cards.
Yeah, but don't throw them away. That's the first thing.
So,
yeah.
And
I mean,
keep them
so who will
safe
be-
from
who will be-
termites.
Who will be? My question is, who will be interested after me?
Me.
Oh.
I mean, obviously. How much more do I have to appeal to you?
Okay.
We, this is.
We will see. We will see.
How much more?
Do we have any more questions? I can't necessarily see from the back, so do make yourselves visible. Is anyone at the back who'd like to ask a question?
Good. Well, it can't have been that clear, but thank you.
I think
anyway.
you've been very, very thorough. It's unusual to end a session early, but does anyone have anything more they'd like to?
No.
I think it's been a fantastic session, and I'd like to thank you, Giles, because I do believe it's actually made us think again about those postcards. and what's written on them, what they represent. And I'm just going to conclude with reading this last paragraph to your introduction. Although pictorial postcards are now history, their historicity, one of those difficult words, how does the
Yeah.
BBC pronounce historiosity?
Had to look for it.
Remains. Although replaced, they provide us and future generations of Pakistanis an invaluable record of buildings, landscapes, events, and people. I think that's an excellent testimony to why we should buy the book, keep our own postcards, and a concluding question.
It's not as much a question because the presentation was very inspiring, very thorough. My only suggestion for people like me who have a abysmal small collection of postcards, and certainly not before 47, and for others, if there is a website or some like a virtual library that can be created, then we can possibly not
Well,
only pass them to you, but it can be archived with the credit.
absolutely. Well, I would. There were two websites which are referred to in the book. One is harappa.com, which is in San Francisco, operated from San Francisco, and the other one is Picturesque India, which is done by Mathurs in New Delhi. So there are websites that have this, and if you want to upload them or you want to get more images, they're the ones I would recommend.
For you, it should be credited to you to create this sort of, as a legacy and testament to your work. I would prefer to, pass on my
Well, certainly,
legacy.
sir. As soon as I get out of this hall, that's the first thing I'm going to do.
Well, there are some books available, and I'm
Yes,
sure
and I'll be
Ijaz
doing-
will be happy to
please.
sign them.
Michelle wants the question.
Michal.
Yes, again, it's not a question, but I think, like this gentleman, I really want to salute you, Ijaz
Oh.
Sahab, not just for this work,
Thank you.
but for all your work in so many areas over the years. Because you are a true scholar and a true polymath, and you've done such a service to the country and to all of us with your eye and your attention to detail. And in this work, you've made me think about, I never thought of postcards as a historical source. So,
I know.
Victoria, you're right, you've made us think, but your body of work speaks for itself, and I just salute you for everything you've done.
Thank you so much indeed. It's very generous.
Well,
Get to hear, it's lovely to hear an obituary while you're still alive. I'm going to end, with your permission, and we've got a couple of minutes, with a story of somebody who came up to me and said, Ijaz, you write books? I said, yes. How many books have you written? I said, how many do you think? And she said, 3 or 4. So I said, no, a few more than that. And she said, oh, how many? And I said, 23. Oh, she said, on which topics? So I said,
long have you got?
number. And, Victoria's mentioned them, so I won't repeat them, but cartography, history, art, miniature paintings, etc. Oh, she said, and forgive me if I say it in Urdu, but she said, oh, मुख्तलिफ मौजू. तो मैंने कहा, जी हाँ, क्या आप एक मौजू पर तवज्जो से काम नहीं कर सकते? Can't you concentrate on one? So, with that, thank you for your appreciation and thank you for your presence
Well,
here today.
thank you very much for being in conversation with Aijazuddin.
Ladies and gentlemen, the session A Man with a Pen, a book by Waqas Khan, is about to begin. Here we have Miss Nazish Ataullah and Mr. Waqas Khan in a discussion. Ms. Nazish Ataullah is an artist, educator, writer, curator, human rights activist, and an active member of the Women's Action Forum. In a career that spans 4 decades, Professor Ataullah is best known as the founder of printmaking specialization in the National College of Arts. She is a graduate of Kinnaird College for Women and She is a graduate of Kinnaird College for Women and the National College of Arts. She undertook postgraduate studies at the Slade School of Fine Art at the Institution of Education, London University. Ataullah retired as a principal of NCA in 2010. She is a fellow of NCA and was awarded with the title Chevalier d'Art by the government of France. She lives and works in Lahore. Next, we have Mr. Waqas Khan. Mr. Waqas was born in Akhtarabad and is a visual artist who uses multi-layered mediums, including drawings and installations. He challenges traditional aesthetic labels such like minimalistic, abstraction, and miniature, introducing an academic debate about his experimental approach. His art ranges from large-scale canvases to neon and wire-based installations. His works are a part of public collections at the Whitworth, Manchester Museum, British Museum, London, Victoria and Albert Museum, London.